I'm Elisa Biagini. I'm a poet and a teacher here at NYU Florence, and I'll be the MC tonight for the final portion of this pretty busy and exciting, I would say, conference. So we're going to have our second Salon. Jennifer, you want to say a couple of words now, or Jen, afterwards? We don't know. Afterwards, good. All right, cool. So I'll be calling you. I'll be sitting here, and then I'll say a couple of words. You have the full bios of people in the folder, so I will not be boring you reading the whole thing. Just a couple of words for each of you, and so get ready when I call you. So the first reader is Diana Tanackovic, who's a writer, visual artist, journalist, and activist, who is going to read from his novel, Lusitania, came out in 2018 and won the NIN Award in Belgrade, where he lives part-time, and in Florence as well. Please come here.
N, the famous explorer of the expanses of the northern seas, briefed the public shortly after the unfortunate sinking of the Titanic in the year 1912 on his particular knowledge regarding icebergs. He was namely the first researcher who had established the relationship between the visible and invisible portions of the icy masses, concluding that the sections above and underneath the water always occurred in a ratio of 1:8. That, however, wasn't all. At the press conference, the bold adventurer reported that within each iceberg, or more precisely, within those concealed 7/8, was hidden the entirety of an upturned house. It had been those houses of manifold eras and forms, Anne asserted, in whose existence he had come to believe after observing them with his own eyes, or more precisely through the visor of his diving helmet during his underwater investigation. Not far off the L archipelago, Anne contended, an entire city appeared before him, floating upside down. This knowledge had granted N indisputable insight into the nature and nascence of icebergs because, as he would soon establish, there was no iceberg that did not thusly carry a house in its underwater womb. An iceberg, declared N to the astounded representatives of the press, is created on the island R when a winter rains so cold that now and again the whole island freezes and gulps down a number of houses which, forsaken and banded in ice, rise and break away from the soil, skid down the steep bank, and disappear into the sea. Some of the houses were massive indeed, said N, proper many-story mansions. After all, imagine what the colossus hides under the icy mass, stretching some tens of meters above the water. Others were quite modest, cottages and shacks, cabins and weekend homes, and in each one, through the windows and glass doors, Anne observed everything beautifully preserved: cabinets and chiffoniers, armchairs and chandeliers, lace curtains, libraries and toys, dishes and pitchers, things that, through some miracle unspoiled, floated upside down through the rooms as though dancing. Before one house, Anne looked long and in awe at a cup of such fine glass that it seemed it might shatter with a touch. He observed as the cup lightly tapped against the window as though summoning him. In those rooms, Anne concluded, hid the greatest secret, the secret of the forsaken house. It was a secret so great and terrible that it would have been of little consequence to an observer, for example, N, whether it was a castle or a log cabin that it was kept in. That was how deep the secret went. And now the journalists observed Anne's thoughtful and melancholy countenance as he had fallen unnaturally silent, as though suddenly the knowledge of the existence of the upturned underwater cities and the origin of icebergs were utterly irrelevant when set against that fragile floating cup. Brevemente, questo è un... Oh, I'm sorry, this is, I'm sorry, just briefly, this is an excerpt from the novel Lusitania. This is actually the introductory chapter translated by Rachel Daum, and it was published, I believe, a couple of years ago in the magazine Los Angeles Review. And the novel actually is a story about the psychiatric hospital in Belgrade during the First World War. It is actually not a historical novel, but rather something of a political allegory that deals more with our time than with the time to which it refers. Anyway, this is more or less what...
Thank you. So it started out with the translation in the spirit of the conference. I now call Christina Chalmers. She's a PhD candidate, comparative literature, NYU, and she researches and the intersectional of intellectual history, feminist philosophy, environmental humanities, psychoanalysis, and Marxist economic theory.
So this was for a newsletter for this this small press called 1080 Press, and it's called The Community of Lovers. It's like a big, it's one whole A4 or whatever sheet of paper, double-sided, and there's 3 columns. So I'm going to kind of read the columns one after the other. But it came from this, I wanted to write something about simultaneity. So maybe keep that in mind. Okay, the place not defining itself as a shell, where the conduit of fear is a surreptitious exit. The TV station builds a glass surround, dodging time's contortions. Simultaneity means I speak to you where you are not and I am not. Time is spindly but will make a knot, and there you'd sleep, planting screens around with different parts of the instant. Could violence be in the stems, in the pixels of things? Contamination the index of time, where pixels jump like particulate matter blazing through, viral loads making leaps. What is the smallest unit filled with? What burden do we magnetize in the cancelled interim? The one the virus cancelled. It stops the tracks of history as universal history turns to virus, infecting the minuscule, immediate tarantula bite of the species. In the negation, lovers found one another. We don't know if this is good. I was doing surreptitious things, looking out over the wheat fields. I said to my friend, let's play a subtraction game. You look out on the landscape and say what element you'd take out. You become a draftsman. I wanted to extract a 20 sign on the field, a speed limit painted into the grass. You said no. The tractors might kill the mice and the people walking in the fields. I emerged into a cornucopia of orange calendulas, white irises, and fuchsia orchids, grasses filtered gold. If only my friends would look away, I could steal a flower which smelled beautiful to the touch. I'd stolen a pink and purple sparkly t-shirt from a girl who was trying to find it. I kept hiding it among my things in a bunk bed dorm. Later, I'd have to deny having stolen it and lying. I put it on, taunting. It was my wounded armature, and I was banished. We are in a worldly adolescence of viral shadows where we grow in time to our emptinesses. Deep time has buried itself in a shallow mud. The species is on fire like the phylogenesis of hydrangea. We come back again to the scenes of the far past, finding a time lost there and lent over to an ending. Light passes as though immediate through your eyes, where it dances with the green shadows pulling through the curtains. This is how we know immediacy, by its signal as a light. Its essential quality falls short of making a world, and then it falls like the glassy blue of a map, where there is a momentary correspondence of a razor and eraser, both blunted by an artist you never met. As dancer, it emits a steadied continuance, though its light will fade and fracture into leaf splinters, bending the sunrise, bringing in its thrall all the sensations of frustration in years gone by, islands in the watery crashes of a mind. Recomposing, the tide receding reveals landmass in space, and you promise to reconnect these like once they were. The frostbite on the hands and cold toes, the feel of wool spooling and fluffing with the moisture of ice cream is felted in your hands, and the pine needles on a wet beach. The clay of winter, the yearning movement of legs running as fast as you can gasp for the air, not sensed by capillaries and always stalling because you cannot. The yearning passes by with the years which are over there where you're not. Tears are deep but muted, which helps you sleep as long as the static on the monitor permits becoming equanimous zone. Static pulls your peripheral vision to the capsule time of an explosion, the ending which is not the ending of ends, but the ending of beginnings. With the snakes, the illicit person trying to leave society and take me too had killed a series of snakes, and their snakeskin bodies along the rocks were like seaweed. I saw a live one and tried to kill it, but the other person said, no, don't do it, because there's a diver in front of us. If trying to kill the snake didn't work, the snake would attack the diver, kill it by stamping on it. So he took the snakes as pets, putting them elsewhere later, returning them to the fields. The dichotomy of fun and space experiences distribution across space and excitement, apocalyptic events that bespeak a kind of simultaneity, but also a geographic discharge or distribution. In a deep contusion of the surface of time, the weather, showing its furrow, internalizes the pathetic fallacy until it would be absolutely true, bifurcated at the core between the event and repetition. The person and the relation, where content and form swap places, relatively not fallow, alive. The absorption of particles, of particulate matter, of water, of pee, of menstrual blood. The end of the world meaning a restart and the loss of depth. Meaning, not just illusion, is split between objects and mirrors. Aesthetic creation is a lower form of the mystical ecstasy, the whirlwind. Blake controls reason, but Bidel sees the texture of the steel in the mirror and not the reflection. The disasters he announces are material. To write a love letter to the sun, nothing better under the sun, above the grave, a particella of the world of yesterday, isolated and forgotten, we try to destroy the theory of reflection, making materiality appear on the other side. Cloud cover in the tropic rain, where poles completely reversible are the compass of the zero time. The lushness of post-rain trees, the bleakness of overexposed grass. Mallarmé shifts romanticism from poetry as memory of a dream to poetry as the dream of memory dreamt by memory. You told me this on a screen. Emerging in the fog of a sandstorm into the phalanstery of thousands and hearing the voices in the dream. Heavy center of the months. Small scale of sound and war. Time lost its elasticity, congealing to a globule. This being written on the threshold of the year. The sun at its highest and longest is a paean to durability, but its extension breaks and recedes.
Thank you, Cristina. Monica Della Torre is a Madelon Leventhal Rand Distinguished Lecturer, Brooklyn College, and her most recent book of poems and translation is called Repetition 19.
So I will read some translations of the poet Amanda Berenguer. Amanda Berenguer was born in Uruguay in 1921. She wrote a lot of really interesting work. She's a neo-Baroque poet. She also wrote some concrete poems. She died in 2010. So in 1972, she would sit outside and record the setting of the sun. And she wrote a book called Composición del Lugar, Composition of a Place, based on the recordings of the sunsets. In 1972 was a very turbulent year in Uruguay. The dictatorship hadn't happened yet, but it was on its way to occur. And so I'll give you a sense of the Spanish. Poniente sobre el mar del viernes 3 de marzo de 1972. Una multitud suspendida de cara a la luz arrastra entre sus pliegues caballos, coches, pájaros, veleros, con vados de tormenta. ¿Cuánta luz queda? ¿Cuánto del día? Pasan sobre la piel curtida del mar y andan sobre él, anubarrados, atraídos por la certera claridad donde bajan flechas, segundos de vida. Vendrá la noche inminente, pero todo es parecido al alba. Miramos la luz única y nos quedamos en ella. So then she translates the same poem into an equation. I will read you both the poem I just read you, and then I'll read you the equation, and then she translates that into a concrete poem. Sunset over sea, Friday, March 3rd, 1972. A hovering multitude facing the light drags within its folds horses, cars, birds, sailboats, warped by the storm. How much light is left? How much of day? They pass over the weathered skin of the sea. They walk on it, overcast, drawn by the precise clarity where arrows descend, seconds of life, imminent night approaches, yet all resembles dawn. We watch the singular light and stay in it. A hovering multitude. Dazzle. To receive the day in awe. Astonishment. Astonishment, to enter the shade in a stupor. Dazzle, beginning. Astonishment, end. Velocity equals dawn plus sunset divided by life. Dazzle is larger than astonishment. Infinity of light equals dazzle minus astonishment multiplied by velocity. Then that becomes this. So I'll just tell you, I'm not going to give you the vocabulary because you've already heard it. And I'm going to, in the spirit of experimentation that we've been discussing, I'm going to give you my rendition of this poem. Multitud, pliegues, tormenta, caballos, atormenta, luz, caballos, veleros, coches, pájaros, veleros, coches, tormenta, bajan flechas, segundos de vida, bajan flechas, segundos de vida, pájaros, tormenta, tormenta, luz, caballos, veleros, multitud, tormenta, bajan flechas, segundos de vida. Tormenta. I thought it was over. Okay, and then there's another one. Let's see. Thursday, January 10th, 1974. Oh, hypocrite old man, unbridled sea, your foam a full set of tricks, rabid over your fiery pupil in the yellow clarity, a sleep-deprived pupil, descending whole to the braids, snakes gone mad from the choppy waters. The sun is all logic, the sea all madness, and they will meet there in the horizontal denouncement, now reddened by fury and conceit. And light will pass behind the annihilation, and the surviving light will stay singular in the somber beyond. O hypocrite old man, unbridled sea, was scale, fire tray, water tray. The pointer indicates beheaded chimera.
Todo lógica. Todo lógica.
Todo sol.
Todo lógica.
Todo sol, lógica.
Y aquí se
Todo sol,
encontrarán
lógica.
en la horizontal denuncia
Todo sol,
ahora
lógica.
enrojecida de furia.
Y aquí se
Aquí
encontrarán
en la horizontal
denuncia,
enrojecida de furia.
ahora enrojecida de furia. Todo sol, lógica. Todo sol, lógica.
Todo lo.
Mar.
Oh,
Mar, todo locura.
Mato,
Mato, locura. Todo sol,
Mar, todo
lógica. Todo locura. Mar, todo locura. Todo locura. Mar, todo locura.
todo locura.
Oh. Mar, todo locura. Thank you.
Wonderful. David Larson is a U.S. poet and translator, currently working at NYU Abu Dhabi.
Hi everyone. So I have a habit, if you like, of isolating bits of text from classical Arabic prose and excerpting them and presenting them as list poems, which it often takes very little work to make these fall into place. So I'm going to read a few of these. And yes, so these are two little lists from the Fihrist, the famous bibliography of Ibn Nadim, which is securely dated, self-dated to the year 987 of the so-called Common Era. And it is a fantastic repository of titles of vanished works. You know, very little of what he records do we have. So here's a short selection of names of books about graceful women who were lovers of each other. The book of Rayhana and Qaranful, which is basil and clove. The book of Ruqayya and Khadija. The book of Mu'yas and Dhakiya. The book of Sukayna and Ar-Rubab. The book of Ghatrifa and Al-Dhalfa. The book of Hind and the daughter of Al-Nu'man. The book of Abda the clever and Abda the fickle. The book of Lu'lu' and Shatira. The book of Najda and Za'um. The book of Salma and Su'ad. The book of Sawab and Surud. The book of Ad-Dahma and Ni'ma. I'll leave those alone and then move on to another selection of works that don't exist. Names of simpletons. Ghafilin, whose comic tales have been written up as books by unknown authors. Comic tales is Nawadir. Comic tales of Joha. Comic tales of Abu Damdam. Comic tales of Ibn Ahmar. Comic tales of Saura the Bedouin. Comic tales of Ibn al-Mawsili. Comic tales of Ibn Yaqub. Comic tales of Ibn Ubayb al-Hazmi. Comic tales of Abu Alqama. And comic tales of Sayfawi. And perhaps you already see the problem with this kind of non-creative work is that it's repackaging the it's not language art, but then it's repackaging it as if I were free to just turn it into a big gag, which in a way, the comic tales, is open to that. And we do better with the comic tales because I could read you some tales of Sayfawi or Abu Alqama. With the women who love women, we have very few of those. And I'd have to say that the vanished primary source value of these vanished primary sources kind of outweighs the fun to be had in the spieling off. The titles, and by the way, there's a scholar, Sahar Amr, who has a whole book on medieval Arabic lesbians and lesbian-like women, and she engages with as much of this material. We have it from Ibn Abi Tayfur, so in any case. So I've kind of put away that type of work, but how fun it was to find that there's a conference that's trying to be held at the American University of Beirut on the art of enumeration, on precisely my old jam, which is the art of the list in classical Arabic. It's being convened by my colleague Bilal Orfali and Christian Junga, and I'm sure going to try to get there, but it's been postponed twice, and it's not looking good for the fall. But if I do get there, I would like to read, actually this is from a secret classic of queer literature that we do have, which is Muhammad ibn Ishaq ibn Yahya al-Washaq's Book of Refinement and Refined People. And dharf, refinement, is a code word, but I'm going to read the most cis-het section I could possibly find in this book. This is called, well, I call it Men Who Loved Women. It goes like this. And this is obviously intentional list poetry. on the part of all Washat. Most of the poets of the desert Arabs, nay, all of them, were impassioned lovers. Among those of frequent mention and widespread fame for passion were Qais Majnun of the Banu Amir, who was the lover of Layla, Qais ibn Darih, who loved Lubna, Tauba ibn al-Humayr, who loved Layla al-Akhyaliya, Kuthayr, who loved Azza, Jamil ibn Ma'mar, who loved Buthaina, Al-Mu'ammil, who loved Al-Dhulfa, Al-Murakish, who loved Asma, Al-Murakish the younger, who loved Fatima bint al-Mundhir, Urwa ibn Hizam, who loved Afra, Amr ibn Ijlan, that's actually Abdullah ibn Ijlan, who loved Hind, Ali ibn Udaim, who loved Manhala, Al-Muhadhib, who loved Ladha, Dhurrumma, who loved Maya, Qabus, who loved Munya, Al-Mukhabbal al-Sa'di, who loved Al-Mailat, Hatim al-Ta'i, who loved Mawiya, Waddah al-Yaman, who loved al-Banin, Ghamar ibn Dirar, who loved Jumal, An-Nimr ibn Tawlab, who loved Hamza, Badr, who loved Num, Shubail, who loved Falun, Bishr, who loved Hind, Amr, who loved Da'ad, Umar ibn Abi Rabi'a, who loved Thuraya, Al-Ahwas, who loved Salama, As'ad ibn Amr, who loved Layla bint Sayfi, Nusayb, who loved Zainab, Suhaim Abd Bani al-Hashas, who loved Umayra, Ubaidullah ibn Qais, who loved Kuthayra, Abu Latahiyah, who loved Utbah, Al-Abbas ibn al-Ahnaf, who loved Fawz, Abu Shis, who loved Umama. These are just a few of the many impassioned lovers. We have limited ourselves to these few in preference to others, so as not to go on too long and mar our book. For every one of these men, there is a love story, relating the circumstances of their passions, with much to comment on and describe. Thanks.
Thank you, David. So for 2 decades, Eric Nicholson has taught liberal studies core courses at NYU Florence, and he has also directed and performed in theatrical productions by the La Pietra Players.
Grazie Elisa, grazie Jen, especially for the invitation. I'll start by saying I'm no poet at all, but an actor who does poetry sometimes, and this was very kindly proposed to me, this reading right now by Jen as a bit of promotion for the production that I'm directing and performing in with the La Pietra Players this semester with some fabulous student actors, including women. I'll be reading from some women poets briefly. This is a new adaptation of especially letters, diary entries by the fascinating Italian traveler of the 17th century, Pietro della Valle. He was called, he became known as Il Pellegrino della Curiosità, the Pilgrim of Curiosity, because it's evident from his works, which are pre-Orientalist, this is really important, pre-Orientalist, that he has a remarkably open mind, non-judgmental. He literally wrote 1 million words reporting on his over 10 years of travels in the Middle East. And he'll be the basis of our show, but we'll be doing some flashbacks. I also want to acknowledge our distinguished liberal studies colleague, Manaz Yuzestade, who's done some outstanding research on relations between the Medici in Tuscany and the Safavid Empire in the 16th and 17th centuries, which will be at the core of what we're doing in a way. So some flashbacks based on Manaz's work, which include one little teaser for you. If you can come to our show, please do. We'll record it for those who can't be there live on May 7th. But there was a Florentine scholar named Vecchietti who became an envoy. He was a brilliant linguist. He learned Arabic and Persian fluently, went to the court of the legendary, practically in his own lifetime, Shah Abbas, wrote poetry in Persian, and he was so struck by Rumi's Song of the Reed that he started to call himself Il Voto, like a hollow reed. So he'll appear in the show, but what I'm doing now is to we are imagining a bit of what in this text that I've been writing and rehearsing, what Pietro della Valle could have encountered beyond just what he reports. And so the focus here is on Sufi poetry, and these quatrains I'll be reading from Rubaiyats. You may have heard of the famous Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, which almost every young American and English speaker in the early 20th century knew by heart, in Edward Fitzgerald's. Really quite eloquent translation, a bit dated, not so faithful, but still worth remembering. Quatrains like, and when like her, O Saki, you shall pass among these guests, stars scattered on the grass, and in that joyous errand reached the spot where I made one, turn down an empty glass. But Omar, who worked as the tent maker, as his nickname goes, in the 12th century, had a contemporary named Mazati Ganjavi. And we just heard from David, these marvelous lesbian queer lovers. She was bisexual. She's been edited out of literary history. I don't know how many people here know about Ganjavi. But she was really remarkable in many ways. So we call her today bisexual or queer. And she has a wonderful rubaiyat. I wish, it's one theme I also want to bring up now, in the wake of Berenguer's poetry and seeing the Corpo. We talked about the body of the text, and I was fascinated seeing that body break up and deconstruct in locuras. And I want to say that this will be read by a female voice. And I'm really interested also in my work as an actor, where you're speaking of the Alfabeti del Corpo. For actors, our corpi, our bodies, are an alphabet. I just want to mention that. And we are moving metaphors, even before, and sometimes when we don't speak. And I often think, especially when I'm on stage, on the theme of gender, that I'm just a human being, or not even a human being, I'm an earthling, without gender. So I want to get beyond the body in a way, and my own vocal cords. I'm not going to do a falsetto and emulate my student who was unable to be here today, who was going to be reading these poems by a woman in her own female voice. But I try to imagine, many of my colleagues try to imagine that we have voices that matter more than even our own bodies and certain our biological sexes, or whatever our gender identification may be. So that's a little preamble into what I'll be reading now. I'll also take us into the 20th century briefly with an outstanding modern Iranian poet, and I'll explain that more when I get there. But this is the first of these 4 quatrains by Mazati Ganjavi, and I better put my glasses on or I'm not going to be able to read this. This body of mine has a heart full of ecstasy inside. It also has soul with 1,000 flames to see inside. When day and night I'm longing for your face, I have 2 eyes full of streams flowing freely inside. And by the way, the translator here is Paul Smith. We can talk about perfect rhymes, which he's using, which emulates a practice in traditional Persian poetry of perfect rhyming. All of those nights that in love with you I slept are gone. You've left me, and all what I told you to be kept are gone. You were soul's friend. You were my heart's peace. You disappeared, and those tears that you wept are gone. To be sucking your ruby lips forever I am longing. With you to take wine in sips forever I am longing. Whether intoxicated, mad, or sober, to hear harp from your fingertips forever I am longing. Though you, crowned head, may be lord of all, one day you may cry from poverty, take a fall. Let folk move heart, be near them, love them. Fear the day you will need help, them you'll call. And that's Ganjavi. Following her, a couple of centuries later, in the time of the famous Hafez, who will be reading also or reciting in the performance, there was a great Jahan Khatun of Shiraz, who also wrote a rubaiyat, and she was imprisoned and did suffer persecution, partially because, like Ganjavi, she was transgressing the conventional rules about her gender. And so there are three of hers. Look at the breeze, it wants to blow again. The garden of the world put on show again. When I looked out at the flowers in the garden, I saw your face lighting it with a glow again. I go here and there like a ball that someone else plays. Breath of patience with that one in me no longer stays. Get up, come. I can no longer endure separation. Hurry. I've been waiting for days and days and days. We have emptied many a full glass of the wine. One more time I wish to bring your lips to mine. Suddenly I felt a great fear for my life, for perhaps without our lips joined, my life I'll resign. And following them, now we get to the 20th century, and you may know of Farrokh Farrokhzad, a brilliant Iranian poet who tragically died at age 33. Her works are banned now by the regime, but her grave in Tehran is a pilgrimage site, especially for young Iranian women. And I cite also Farrokh because she has a marvelous collection called All That Remains Is Voice, on this theme of the lingering voice, and the voice that can potentially transcend our bodies and our genders. So here, and also in the theme of translation, thank you, Jen, for letting me read this in Italian. I don't have Farsi myself, so this is already a displacement into Italian. Then I'll read it in English. This is her very famous feminist poem, really, I Will Greet the Sun Again, near in Italian. Saluterò di nuovo il sole. Saluterò di nuovo il sole e il torrente che mi scorreva in petto. Saluterò le nuvole dei miei lunghi pensieri e la crescita dolorosa dei pioppi in giardino che con me hanno percorso le secche stagioni. Saluterò gli stormi di corvi che a sera mi portavano in dono l'odore dei campi notturni. Saluterò mia madre, che viveva nello specchio, immagine della mia vecchiaia, e saluterò la terra, il suo desiderio ardente di ripetermi e riempire di semi verdi il suo ventre infiammato. Sì, la saluterò di nuovo. Arrivo, arrivo, arrivo. Con i miei capelli come odori che sgorgono dal sottosuolo e gli occhi miei l'esperienza densa del buio, con gli arbusti che ho strappato ai boschi dietro il muro. Arrivo, 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 e la soglia trabocca d'amore ed io ad attendere quelli che amano e la ragazza che è ancora lì. Nella soglia traboccante d'amore, io la saluterò di nuovo. And that translates as, I will greet the sun again, translated here by Paul Weinfield. I will greet the sun again, and the little river that once ran in me, and the clouds that were my ruminations, and the aching blooms of the poplar trees, my companions in those seasons of delight, of drought. I will greet the crowd of crows again, who brought me their rich perfumes, gifts from gardens of the night, and my mother, who lived in the mirror, and whose shape was the shape of my own old age. I will greet the earth again, who, in her lust to create me again, fills her fiery belly with seeds of green. I am coming, I am coming, I am coming. I will come again with my long hair dripping the scent of dirt, with my eyes inflicting the density of darkness with brambles I've picked from the far side of the wall. I am coming, I am coming, I will come again, and the doorway once more will be filled with love, and I'll greet the lovers standing in the doorway, and the little girl there, still standing in love. And just as a finale here, another preview of our script, if I may. I've translated a bit this myself, a quatrain which Pietro della Valle records that he saw in the tomb of Sadi Shirazi, a contemporary of Rumi's, an author in Shiraz, who maybe translates himself into another being, and the Sufi trope, finally talking to himself, and the Sufi dissatisfaction, of course, with language itself and its limitations. So I'd like to suggest this will be the closing piece, that here what matters, again, is voice, not being, not the identity. And in fact, he ends with a trope about total self-effacement. But I proceed with a preamble to this, which will be part of the script that I'll be narrating myself. We soon crossed the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf, passing by the lands south of Persepolis and Shiraz. I remembered my beloved Siti yet again, and threw red roses into the sea, thinking of the poem I had read at the tomb of the famous Saadi Shirazi, author of the Khulistan, the Rosebush, and the Bustan, the Garden. Che il rosaio e il giardin così ben scrisse qui depose morendo il suo mortale, ma la fama conservano immortale I versi che compose mentre ei visse. And that's Pietro della Valle's own translation of the Persian original, and this is now my translation, as we move on into English, of Pietro's Italian. He who wrote so well, the rosebush ring and the garden lies here, lies here after dying. But the verses he composed while living keep their fame fresh and everlasting. And one of our last pieces will be this one by Shirazi, by Mahmoud Jamal. In love there are no days or nights. For lovers it is all the same. The musicians have gone, yet the Sufis listen. In love there is a beginning, but no end. Each has a name for his beloved. For me, my beloved is nameless. Saadi, if you destroy an idol, then destroy the idol of the self. Thank you. Grazie.
Thank you, Eric. Now I'm particularly happy to call Carmen and Sasser, who's a first-year writing students here at NYU, is brave. Come along.
Hi. Just before I read the poem, I wanted to give a little bit of background context. This is based on a poem I wrote for my writing class with Professor Biagini, and the prompt was to write from the perspective of an animal in Florence. And I was especially intrigued by the birds in Florence, not only the pigeons, which are so common, but these little speckled brown and white birds. They're called house finches. And I see them quite often, just kind of around pigeons, but I was intrigued by the fact that they have that brown coloring, because especially in the animal kingdom and concerning birds, especially the more bland and like plain colored ones are female. And every time I look at them, I can just kind of see them struggling to get the food from pigeons and fight their way to get things. And that kind of drew me to use them as an inspiration for the female condition. And just kind of the struggle, and not only that, but the strength that women put into like daily life, and that all women have to face. And then I added that to kind of the architecture of Florence through the eyes of a bird, as well as just the kind of the everlasting kind of power of nature that is so feminine in my eyes. So, yeah. Okay. It is she who we should fear when the towns, like last week's milk, turn sour. Cathedrals crumble, bridges burn, and paint peels. When our bodies, no longer our own, belong once again to the raging green. When dust to dust is literal, whispering to ears that for once would listen, and the fall of the greats, the destroyers of perfect worlds, are feeding the worms and sprouting blooms from their brains, it is she who will then feed, pick, and tear with all the respect she can rightly hold in her tiny grasp. She will gorge herself to fullness on the meat of what once was, build nests in the crooks of our ivory arms, stuff our hollow eyes with her new treasures, and sing her song, jubilantly triumphant from atop our stringy-haired heads. loud and lovely and light and dark, clear and small and strong and surviving. It is she. Until then, her life exhales for her young, shovels air in so heavily that her breast swells with something akin to dread. When food is scarce, winds bite, rain stings. Wings swipe a golden sphere, her reflection is forgotten by her. She never even looked. Nailed wires touch ground and hop, hop, hop forever, maybe. Bricks stack and ascend for the sky, though her feathered body glides through the turrets, quite the obstacle, never, ever the spectacle. A beak of gold pecks and pokes for the crumbs last night's batch, gone cold on the stones, the cobblestones which challenge a mother, aggravate a girl. A chubby peach hand grasps tears and slime and seeds, a husk of dough the brat did not eat, for her. She ducks and dodges. Chubby hands are for holding daddies. Move away. Get. Belly full of slush and widened eyes, mother finds child, spits like the drunk she swiped for shells into the mouth of her three-quarters nest. 7 minutes of rest, let there be light, and she's back and forth again and again. They've got to eat. Survive, feed, survive. Outside those doors, Michelangelo knew nothing. His David lies under a roof, forever frozen as a waiting boy. The tortured hero was never born from that marble. He won't understand. Born in the sun, not to know life. So he won't come along outside those doors. The charming coo of the scrap-fattened pigeons that steal her earnings haunts her short sleep. The bridge that sparkles glints in her eye and blinds her for a moment, enough to graze her, enough to hurt. Gaunt and small, speckled and brown, she does not see the rose window, geometric shapes of wine and marigold as she careens through the space between, the space vast and dark-stained, ending. She bounces off walls and screams a tiny chirp as panic, real and wrenching, twisting her hungry gut, sets in. Imagine, if she knew, what a beautiful cage she would die in. Flitting about the ceiling, onlookers on the ground, taking notice and pressing record, to savor a mother's panic, relish in her screeches as she hurls, feathers and all, over and over again into the stained glass. It was she you may have feared, that may have consumed you, all in all, piece by piece, when your time came to fly above it all, picked and poked at. She was not the first, not the last, not the only, but she was so very lonely. Mother and girl and perpetual servant, savage by the end of it, a monster of passion that we will fear when it is she who rises again with the raging green. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Natalie Handel is a professor of practice in literature and creative writing at NYU Abu Dhabi and a writer. Latest, most recent book is Life in a Country. Album, please, Natalie.
Hi. I'm going to read two poems from my forthcoming collection. These are all poems. These are poems set in Rome. So my second home after New York City. Freedom. We went to Altri Scalini via Pernispana, but ended up across the street in Barzillai. I looked at him as he ordered wine. Monti in ancient Rome was the Suburra, a red light district. Julius Caesar spent his childhood here. I wondered if he knew that I looked at his lips, felt the Colosseum close by, taught of the gladiators, often slaves, criminals, prisoners of war. Some were able to fight for their freedom. I wondered if he knew anything about how to be free in this world. If he knew the ones who won the war were tired, the ones who hung their brothers were tired, the ones who loved too much were tired, those who feared or hoped too much were also tired. Death was tired, tomorrow too. The city could come apart. We should remember everything to fight freedom, or do our memories cost us our heaven? He placed a kiss on my lips, said, I might fall, I wondered if he feared its freedom. American Love Story in Rome. I had a dream I left the other side of myself in New York City. I have to go back to get it, but I can't move. I wonder if I shut the windows, left flowers to wilt, left food to decay, left my heart in the Queensboro Bridge. I feel my mind blow open. I run to the Tevere, chasing chaos the way the heart does after it's broken. Seeing my favorite song sinking the way the dying does for days, I don't know what it all means. Maybe that's how the world walks into us with worry. Or maybe that's how it goes, like a boat coming from the future to take us away. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Janet Hendrickson is a clinical assistant professor at NYU, New York, and is also a translator from Spanish and Portuguese.
Okay, so I'm going to read from a new project. It's a new experimental translation that should be coming out next year, and it is a translation of a translation made by a very marginal Spanish poet named Francisco Pino, and it is his book titled Unfaithful Translation of the Raven by Edgar A. Poe, published in 1997. To give a little background on the author, Pino was born in 1910. He died in 2002. He's extraordinarily prolific. He made over 60 books, including words. Can't remember if that includes the artist books. He was loosely affiliated with several avant-garde movements in the 1930s. He spent several decades writing like very beautiful but conventional, often religious poetry. And then in the 60s and 70s, he sort of took a turn toward rejecting written language, making artists' books, concrete poetry, mail art, sort of like the pinnacle of his artist book production. Just the title was a black box. And he called his visual poetry poeturas, which for him is a portmanteau of poesis, meaning to make, and turar, which is an archaic form of the verb durar, duration, and also to turn is implicit in that. And so his translation of The Raven includes 8 of these poeturas, ink drawings, that he calls the true translation of the poem, a concrete ode to Edgar Allan Poe, and an introduction that does a lot of things, including comparing infidelity to adultery, but happily so, calling translation the highest creative act, and also says that translation is a mode to access the divine. So my translation is a back translation into English of The Raven. I have no memory of the original. I haven't read it since high school. I mean, I have Nevermore, and that's about it. So what's going to happen is soon, I'm going to actually compare this version with Poe's original and just see what happens in this game of telephone, and write an auto-theoretical introduction based on that, and also on my response to Pino's own oddly theoretical work. So maybe I'll just read a few stanzas. He calls them, he gives them titles and calls them chapters. So, The Raven. 1. A knock, the visitor. A certain night, perhaps at midnight, while I read books by forgotten sages, exhausted by my reading now, my drooping eyes closing, I felt a knock. Suddenly, so soft it shook me. Somebody knocked at my chamber door, I thought. A visitor came knocking at my door. A knock rang out, nothing more. 2. A name, December and Leonore. I remember well, it was a dark December. Lightning flashed, thunder resounded. December drew its dismal aspect on the ground. I felt a terrible wish for dawn. I sought comfort while I read. Impossible. My memory was wandering, loud, lucid, like another December, when I thought of Leonore suddenly, my lost love. I said only angels could have given her this name, this high celestial name. I find it hard to think this earth might take pleasure in her name in another woman, that the earth could ever take pleasure in this name in any woman, oh, unspeakable name forevermore, unnameable name forevermore. 3. A rustle. Then a rustle, a silken swish fell over me, this vivid swish of silk through both garnet curtains of my room. Fear fell garnet over me too, and I trembled with what strange, terrible tremors. Oh, lost memories, the rustle, those knocks. A rustle of damask silks, the knock at the door, made a knock in my mind only a sound. And I thought it has to be a visitor who, coming late, is knocking in a hurry at my chamber door. A rustle in my soul at the door only, a rustle and nothing more. For the night, I shook. What were these moments? But soothed now, calm came back to me. Turning toward this strange stranger, I pled, "Sir, madam, pardon me. I didn't hear you come, please, the fault is mine. I had fallen asleep among the books I was reading by forgotten sages when you came calling at my door. I didn't know if it was you or maybe an intruder calling at the door, curious. I stood to look. I opened the door and saw night outside only, nothing more." I'll read 2 more. 5 dreams, Leonore. Then lost in my night, I watched the night. I dreamed every fantastic dream anyone in this world would dream. In my dreams, a word rebounded, furrowing the spaces, Leonore. The heavens pronounced it, her blue lips, and the blessed echo returned in a whisper, the lips of the echo, Leonore. This, nothing more. 6, knowledge. Then I turned back to my smoldering room. My soul burned to know, to know, to know. I listened once again, the knocks rang closer. Maybe from the blinds of my room, maybe the blinds moved. I yearned for a cautery to soothe the longing of my heart. To clarify the mystery, I asked, anything to soothe my heart's sorrow. But the wind answered, only the wind and nothing more. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I now call up a duo, Robert Fitterman and Roberto Balò. Robert is a clinical professor at NYU, and his most recent collection, Crève Coeur, is forthcoming in the fall, right? You said, okay. Roberto Balò is a poet and teacher, and his latest book, Saga, came out in 2019, and they will tell you more. Please.
So we're going to read, I should say first, Roberto and I have been translating each other's work since September in a pretty weekly way of having a few glasses of wine and having a very pleasurable and civilized way of translating. So we're going to read a short piece of mine, and then we're going to read from Roberto's book-length poem, Saga, which I'll say a few words about after. And what we're going to read of mine, Roberto's going to read the translation. And translation is on everyone's mind. And this is not really quite related to translation, this piece, but I realized as I was thinking about it, it could be understood in hundreds of languages. Sprawl.
Espansione.
J. Crew, H&M, Timberland, McDonald's, Taco Bell, Gap, Sunglass Hut, Foot Locker, Starbucks.
J. Crew, Starbucks, Sunglass Hut, H&M, Gap, Taco Bell, Foot Locker, McDonald's, Timberland.
Starbucks, Timberland, Gap, H&M, J. Crew, Foot Locker.
Starbucks, Foot Locker, Gap, H&M, Taco Bell, McDonald's,
Starbucks, Foot Locker, Timberland, J. Crew, H&M, Taco Bell, J. Crew, Timberland, McDonald's, Taco Bell.
Gap, Sunglass Hut, Foot Locker, Starbucks, J. Crew, H&M, Gap, Taco Bell, Foot Locker, McDonald's, Timberland.
McDonald's, Starbucks, Timberland, Gap.
H&M, J. Crew, Starbucks, Foot Locker, Gap, H&M.
Taco Bell, McDonald's, Starbucks, Foot Locker, Timberland.
Taco Bell, Foot Locker, Gap, McDonald's, Timberland.
Thank you. So Saga is a book-length poem. It's a serial poem collection of short poems that are a kind of sci-fi lonesome journey paralleling the Odyssey. Sometimes the mirroring is very direct and sometimes less so. But yes, we are in space. And we'll be reading about 7 poems. The poems on the page are very minimal, without punctuation, just to give a sense of what they look like.
Falsa partenza. La mia astronave è partita solo per cercare conferme a quello che già sapeva. Inutile partire, inutile restare. Penny, lasciata a casa, mi dimenticherà 1000 volte, ma non ha detto niente. Anche lei sapeva, Itaca morbida, troppo comoda, troppo facile morire tra i tuoi seni teneri, anche se questo viaggiare è pur sempre una prigione.
False start. My spaceship left only to seek confirmation of what it already knew. No point in leaving, no point in staying. Penny left at home. She will forget me 1,000 times, but she didn't say anything. She knew, too, soft Ithaca, too comfortable, too easy to die between your warm breasts, even if this traveling is still a prison.
Ubik. Quel giorno la materia ha cominciato a rarefarsi, gli oggetti erano sfocati, la realtà iniziava a svanire, da lucida diventava opaca. È stato un attimo, un infinitesimo di secondo, che non se n'è più andato.
Ubik. That day, matter began to thin out. Objects became blurry. Reality started to fade from shiny to opaque. It was a moment, an infinitesimal second that never left.
Mentre il tempo passa. Scansare meteoriti, schizzare negli iperspazi, girovagare sotto droghe aliene. Che differenza tra il fresco condizionato di questa astronave e quello dei boschi che frequenti, tra le piscine spaziali e i mari pescosi in cui ti bagni. Penny, abilissima sarta dalla tela troppo piccola per la mia pazzia enorme. 20 anni sono troppi per chiunque abbia un po' di vita addosso.
As time goes by, avoid meteorites, splash into hyperspace, wander around on alien drugs. What a difference between this air-conditioned spaceship and that of the woods you love so much, among the space pools and the seas full of fish in which you bathe. Penny, a very skilled seamstress, weaving a fabric way too small for my oversized madness. 20 years is too long for anyone with a little life in them.
Cronos. È il tempo che condanna i sentimenti e le navi servono per provare a rincorrerlo e guadagnare un pugno di nanosecondi.
Chronos. It is time that condemns feelings, and the ships are used to chase it down and gain a handful of nanoseconds.
Fame di distrazione. Smettere di giocare con il tempo. È ora di sembrare grandi, laurearsi e lavorare. È ora di mettere su casa, di quelle tutte vetri e idromassaggi. È ora di pianificare esplorazioni, sfruttamenti minerari, viaggi interstellari, riduzioni dei costi, massimizzazioni dei profitti. Tutto ciò che serve per diventare inutile.
Appetite for distraction. Stop playing around. It's time to grow up, graduate, get a job. It's time to set up home, all glass and whirlpools. It's time to plan explorations, mineral exploitations, interstellar travels, cost reductions, profit maximization, everything it takes to become useless.
Destinazione finale. Partire è il tuo istinto. Io traccheggio, rimando, freno, non che non voglia. È la destinazione che è nota.
Final destination. Your instinct is to leave. Me, I avoid, drag my feet, hold back. It's not what I want, but it is a known destination.
Ambiguità temporale. Ti penso ogni tuo giorno di 24 ore, sogno immancabile dei miei sonni chimici. Qui, dove i soli tramontano e sorgono ogni 5 minuti, dove queste orribili stelle placebo di te mi drogano quale eroe tra i lotofagi, e gli anni luce del ritorno sono troppo lunghi per i miei immanenti rimuginamenti.
Temporal ambiguity. I think about you 24/7, inevitable dreams from my chemical sleep. Here, where the suns set and rise every 5 minutes, where these horrible stars are a placebo of you, they drug me as a hero among the lotus eaters. And the light years of return, they are too long for my eminent ruminations.
Niente di nuovo. Libri e film avevano già scoperto tutto. Più le navi avanzano, più si avverano le profezie. Ogni nuovo pianeta è una conferma. Niente di nuovo dal fronte stellare. Ecco la banalità dell'universo.
Nothing new. Books and films have already discovered everything. The further the ships advance, the more the prophecies come true. Every new planet is a confirmation. Nothing new from the stellar front. Here it is, the banality of the universe.
Grazie. E grazie Robert.
Grazie. Thank you. Eugene, you want to come? Okay, so one last poem. Here we go. And since, Eugene, where do you want to sit? There. I want to read just one poem, do not worry. And it's actually from The Plant of Dreaming, and since I wasn't sure what I was going to read, but I thought since Eugene was here and he translated the poem, why not having him reading the English first, his translation, and then I read the original, and then we say goodbye.
La Gita, the outing. The epigraph is, I have to accept my inability to straighten out anything here. Nathan Zach. A wind that kneads me with hot gas, that melts my soles while I pick. What stone recalls you? The sound of what siren? Now is the time of the mine, clay grazing my head, hard language, lamp gone out. Stairs in the rock, claw the bottom, where skin sweats stones, gurgles the heart. We go down the shaft, along a trail of pyrite crumbs, go down with our eyes, knees, go down to trail the trace, drop, marking the rock by dropping, making memory overflow. We melt with the heat, drop by drop. We knead back into the sea. We meet again, knots on eyelids. I listen inward to the support beams, count the fuses that open the view. I amass us for the flight, look for us in the dark, in the heat. I look for us too, you a cloud of memory, me running from myself like mercury, that tremor of a thermometer I swallow, glass and all. A train from the dark, a foot on each track, an eye blinded that looks for you, a train in the dark that waits for you. Then it is the crackle of breath that announces you. All the dust got into the alveoli, now sandpaper. It is the glow of a match within the eye. Dust comes down from the mines, interlaces with lung. At each floor the sack sags, gets more threadbare. In the gallery, fever still, car running on empty, overheating, fast breath of the one that feels, the one that one flees. A light bulb sizzles and goes out. Pulling the red thread from your shoulder blade, following you in the earth, bones beyond the frontier of the lip, us removed from light. This, the labor of cutting and filling, what matter whether with stone or word.
Thank you, Eugene. And I picked this poem also because it's about minds, it's about language. We did have a talk about this poem with Jennifer a while ago, so there was also, it's also for her, and it's also about roots and memory. It's about a lot of things, and it's unusually long for usually very much shorter poems. La Gita. Devo rassegnarmi a non potere qui raddrizzare nulla. Nathan Zach. Un vento che mi impasta col soffione, che mi fonde le suole mentre faccio la mia cernita. Quale sasso ti ricorda il suono di quale sirena? Adesso è il tempo della miniera, della terra che mi sfiora il capo, del parlare indurito, della lampada spenta. Scale dentro la roccia grattano il fondo, dove si sudano sassi e il cuore gorgoglia. Ci scendiamo in miniera, seguendo briciole di pirite. Ci si scende con gli occhi, coi ginocchi. Ci si scende a cercare la traccia, la goccia che ha segnato la pietra col cadere, che fa la memoria traboccare. Ci sciogliamo col caldo, goccia a goccia. Ci rimpastiamo al mare, ci ritroviamo, nodo nella palpebra. Dentro ascolto il legno del sostegno, conto le micce che aprono alla vista, ci raduno prima della volata, ci cerco nel buio e nel calore, ci cerco a noi due. Tu, nube di memoria, io che mi sfuggo come di mercurio, tremito di termometro che ingoio vetro e tutto. Un treno dal buio, un piede per binario, un occhio accecato che ti cerca, un treno nel buio che t'aspetta, poi è il crepito a respiro ad annunciarti, tutta la polvere infilata negli alveoli, ora carta vetrata. È il bagliore di cerino dentro all'occhio, la polvere che scende dalle mine, s'è intrecciata al polmone e ogni piano la sacca è più lisa, più pesa, e in galleria ancora febbre, macchina che va a vuoto e surriscalda, l'affanno accelerato di chi sente sfuggirsi, lampadina che sfrigola e svapora. Sfilarti il filo rosso dalla scapola, seguirti nelle ossa della terra, oltre il confine del labbro, noi, rimossi dalla luce. Questo è un lavoro di taglio e riempimento, poco importa se sasso o se parola. Grazie. Thank you, everybody. Jen, do you want to come over and say a couple of words?
Aha, okay. It's been an incredible 2 days, and I'm sure we're all quite tired, but also, pumped up with adrenaline and all of that. But anyway, this is our entire planning committee, and so I want to thank them, as well as thanking all of you who've participated and spent this time with us. Yeah. No, something to them.